Alongside the crowbar and gravity gun, the Tau Cannon from the original Half-Life has become one of the franchise's most recognizable weapons. Over the years, it has been the subject of countless remakes, cosplays, and tributes. It is undoubtedly a fan favorite and instantly recognizable. From its unique visuals and sound design to the memorable scene of its introduction, the Tau Cannon quickly cemented its place as an iconic Half-Life weapon. In this video, we'll go over its conception, operation, and its proposed inclusion in later Half-Life titles. So with that out of the way, let's have a look at where it began, with the original Half-Life. The Tau Cannon is a cornerstone of the Half-Life arsenal. After its introduction in the chapter Questionable Ethics, the weapon goes on to be an indispensable asset in the fight against the forces of Xen and the US military.
Don't let it overcharge. What do you mean, overcharge?
Blasting through waves of soldiers and surface tension is great fun, until you inevitably run out of uranium ammo and have to scavenge for more. First-time players might only use it as a big, shiny blaster, taking out helicopters and tanks with ease. But where it really shines is in Half-Life's online deathmatch mode, where not only does the weapon do more damage, it also charges 60% faster. It can shoot right through walls, and its beams can ricochet around corners and even travel complex paths to their target. This becomes very deadly in popular maps like Crossfire, where experienced players can fire a charged shot at just about any corner or surface and reasonably expect it to kill someone. This technique is known as wall Gauss, and it is both amazing and frustrating to see in action. A small code tweak made for deathmatch mode allows players to go flying through the air by firing a charged shot right at their feet in a technique known as Gauss jumping. This was Valve's answer to Quake's iconic rocket jumping. Combining these two techniques along with careful bunny hopping can make players virtually unstoppable. For a weapon called the Tau Cannon, it may seem strange that so many people refer to it as the Gauss. This discrepancy was caused by a quirk of Half-Life's development. The original conception of the weapon was as a literal Gauss rifle, otherwise known as a coil gun. A weapon that, in real life, uses electromagnetic coils to accelerate a projectile to extremely high velocities. In practice, this translated to a big sci-fi gun that could shoot through walls. In the wake of Half-Life's reveal at E3 1997, many gaming publications jumped in with their own inside stories about Valve and the upcoming Half-Life. While they all hit the same points in their own ways, AI, monsters, animation, graphics, etc., very few of them even mentioned the game's weapons, as Valve remained tight-lipped and let very little slip. The most detailed description of the game's weapons we could find was in the July 11, 1997 Valve interview conducted by Doug Radcliffe for Online Gaming Review. John Guthrie, programmer and game designer for Half-Life, said this on the subject. "We haven't talked about weapons much yet, but I can tell you there will be 18 of them, including both old favorites, pistol, shotgun, and some fun new specialty weapons, like a crossbow, a tranquilizer gun, and a Gauss gun for shooting through walls. The Gauss rifle is our solution to the problem of campers. Since the charges go through walls, you can basically hose down an area where campers tend to set up. No more camper." By the end of 1997, all official mentions of the Tau Cannon had dried up. The weapon's next appearance, and first visual appearance, was in a group of Half-Life screenshots leaked in early 1998. They show an early iteration of the Tau Cannon's model, as well as reams of other early content. The operation of the weapon appears to be identical to the final game. This early version of the model is also available in the Half-Life SDK. It's clear that Valve wanted to keep the game's energy weapons under tight wraps until release. Over the course of Half-Life's development, Valve distributed dozens of early copies of the game to various press outlets. One of these press demos, dated August 26, 1998, has a list of guidelines for topics which are off-limits for publication. On the subject of weapons, it had this to say: "The only weapons we will reveal are crowbar, Glock, Colt Python with laser, MP5, crossbow. Do not talk about the other weapons. However, it's fine to say something general, like we've got cool experimental energy weapons and alien weapons. We just don't want to reveal specifics." The next and final time the Tau Cannon would appear before release would be at E3 1998. While it wasn't shown in any of the demo videos, a flyer given to the press apparently included this image of the Tau being fired at a Vortigaunt, showcasing the beam and ricochet effects. Evidently, the weapon's model had already been finalized and would remain unchanged until the game shipped. By the time Half-Life was nearing completion, Valve had decided on a new name for the weapon. The Gauss gun was now the Tau cannon. Due to the fact that changing the name in the game's internal file structure would have been needlessly time-consuming, the game still refers to it as the Gauss. But in Deathmatch mode, which was refined late in development, a kill by the Tau cannon is recorded accurately in the console as such. The code even has a small function to convert the name. Despite this change, neither name is actually printed or spoken anywhere else in the game. The closest thing is a cut line spoken by the HEV suit, which would have played when the player picked up the Tau cannon.
Experimental hypervelocity projectile weapon acquired.
Side note, an experimental hypervelocity projectile weapon is basically a more verbose description of a real-life Gauss rifle. This line likely predates the semantic switch from Gauss gun to Tau cannon. Another common name, XVL-1456, came from Half-Life's HD model pack. The HD pack was initially developed by Gearbox for the PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast ports of Half-Life. The name can be seen printed on the side of the HD version of the model. After Half-Life's critical and commercial success, Valve realized that Half-Life 2 had to exceed all expectations, no matter how long it took. With the weapon being so beloved in the first game, it seemed only natural to include it in the sequel. While Valve had prototyped dozens of strange and interesting weapons for Half-Life 2, by the time the game was leaked in October 2003, the vast majority of them had been shelved, with the Tau cannon being one of the only exceptions. The weapon's design had changed somewhat, but the functionality had not. By the time the game launched in November 2004, however, the Tau cannon had been relegated to a vehicle-mounted turret weapon. It is likely that the concept for the buggy carrying the Tau cannon was introduced when the buggy was. The E3 2003 demonstration video Coastline, which predates the game's theft, showcases the weapon in that role. The earliest known reference to the buggy in Half-Life 2's leaked development files is a level from January 2003 titled testroom_jeep.vmf. It is worth noting that in all of the 1,360 leaked Half-Life 2 development levels, the only one which includes the Tau cannon is a developer map intended for testing many weapons and features. Sometime between October 2003 and the launch of the game, Valve developed a scene in which the player was to be given the Tau cannon by a Vortigaunt, who removes it from the Jeep at Lighthouse Point. While the scene cannot be fully restored due to missing code and assets, there are some leftovers. In the folder that contains the unique dialogue for Lighthouse Point, there is a voice line meant to be spoken by one of the rebels called gettauoff.wav.
We'll get that weapon off the car for you, but you're gonna have to continue on foot.
We'll get that weapon off the car for you, but you're gonna have to continue on foot.
In the closed caption script file, there is further dialogue for the Vortigaunt mechanic who would detach the weapon. Part of this dialogue was actually reused for a much earlier scene in the game, where Vortigaunt attaches the pulse cannon to the player's airboat in the chapter Water Hazard.
Take that chopper down, and you should be able to tear on through to Eli's place.
The Freeman will accept this weapon or suffer greatly on the road ahead.
Side note, in Prima's Half-Life 2 strategy guide, the weapon that is attached to the airboat is called a Gauss cannon. No other piece of media or game file refers to it by this name. The Jeep itself also has some leftovers. In the game's code, the Jeep has two inputs, one called Start Remove Tau Cannon and the other called Finish Remove Tau Cannon. Their only function is to play a basic animation of the weapon levitating off and then hiding it. In Half-Life 2's FGD file, which are scripts used by Valve's Hammer Editor software to define the entities and objects that can be placed in a game level, There is one final leftover of this scene. It contains the definition for an entity called script_tau removal, which calls for a Vortigaunt to initiate the sequence. Its description is custom entity used to handle the tau removal sequence in Coast, unused. The entity does not exist in any versions of Half-Life 2 source code that are available to the public, so its exact functionality is not known. There is another scene later in the game developed with the Tau Cannon in mind. In Nova Prospect, specifically the level D2 Prison 03, the tortured Vortigaunt could be freed by using the Tau Cannon to fire through the glass and open their cage. When the source files of Half-Life 2's retail levels were leaked in 2016, this scene was uncovered by modders. The Vortigaunt's dialogue is on-screen placeholder text, and much of the logic was unfinished. Here's that scene restored as accurately as possible. It is interesting to note that no ammo entity for the Tau Cannon is known to have ever existed within Half-Life 2's source code. Given the Vortigaunt's dialogue in the previous scene, it is possible that they intended Vortigaunts to charge the weapon directly. There are a handful of other minor leftovers, which I'll go over shortly. For reasons unknown, the Vortigaunt has animations for carrying and firing the Tau. The weapon was evidently cut late in development, due to the fact that a polished vector HUD graphic exists for it. It is worth noting that it is a direct remake of the HUD icon from Half-Life 1, despite the fact that the design had changed dramatically. The levels D2 Prison 06 and D3 Citadel 04 both have logic that is meant to give the player the Tau Cannon when starting a new game from those levels. A slightly earlier version of D3 C17 06A leaked in 2014 contains the same entity logic. With the Tau Cannon only seeing limited use in Half-Life 2, Valve kept it on the table for future titles. In the next section, we'll discuss its possible inclusion in the cancelled Half-Life 2 Episode 3. From what little information has trickled out over the years, it is apparent that Half-Life 2 Episode 3 was at one time to see the return of both the Tau Cannon and Gluon Gun. In September 2011, the then-private Dota 2 beta was leaked to the public. Within the game's files was a text document detailing the entire directory listing of the Dota 2 source code. Buried in this list were references to several files from Episode 3's development. Among the unique entries, like the Ice Gun and the Weaponizer, were some familiar names, like the Tau Cannon and the Gluon Gun, represented by weapon_gauss.cpp and weapon_egon.cpp respectively. A year later, when Valve launched a closed beta of Source Filmmaker, a number of new leaked files hinted at Episode 3, including one called ep3.fgd. The file contained definitions for the Tau Cannon, as well as uranium ammo. Interestingly, it shares the same model with the Ice Gun and Gluon Gun, called w_weaponizer.mdl. While the following is only speculation, it's possible that the Weaponizer was a multi-purpose tool that could transform into different weapons. The FGD also contained references to Margarita Soldiers, one of the many internal demos done as a part of Valve's directed design experiments in late 2007 and early 2008. Based on this inclusion, it seems likely that the Episode 3 content from both of these leaks were leftovers from that time period rather than indicative of any later developments. When the leaks dried up, the future of the Tau Cannon became unclear. After several years of drought, strings from a new Half-Life game began appearing in Valve's Steam VR home. Up until the announcement and release of Half-Life Alyx 4 years later, not a single reference to the Tau Cannon was seen. That is, until the game's release on March 23, 2020. The moment the Half-Life Alyx preload unlocked, the internal file structure was torn apart by the fans. They quickly uncovered what appeared to be evidence of the Tau Cannon once being considered to appear in the game. Internally called the Railshot, the Tau Cannon would have returned as an upgrade, providing an alternative fire mode for the shotgun. Some sound scripts marked as old reference the original Half-Life 1 Tau Cannon sounds, but newer sounds exist as well. Due to Alyx's complex 3D audio systems, playing any individual Tau Cannon sound effect would not be fully representative of how it would have sounded in the game. Piecing together all the various parts, here's what we think a Tau Cannon shot might have sounded like in Half-Life Alyx. And here are the wind up and wind down sounds. Several particle effects also exist for the weapon, using the old name weapon_Gauss. A short video showing all of these particle effects is available in the description below. A possible iteration of Alyx's Tau design can be seen in the shotgun model used by the Combine Charger. An unused set of animations called Shotgun Heavy Tau Open, Close, and Rotate show a small 3-pronged device opening on the weapon and spinning up. Tajiv Kohli, DigiPen alum and Half-Life Alyx developer, commented on the Tau Cannon's inclusion. It added a kind of supercharged shot to the shotgun that functioned similarly to a railgun shot. It was trying to make the shotgun more viable during long-range gunfights. The way to activate it ended up being too complicated to execute accurately during combat, and players would often just switch to one of the other guns during longer-range gunfights anyways. It was adding unneeded and unused complexity to the gun, so we cut it in favor of the grenade launcher upgrade. I think it was cut probably around a year or so before the game came out, and was only being tested in the game for a few months. Since the release of Alyx, there has been no activity hinting at a new Half-Life title. While one will certainly come someday, the future of the Tau Cannon remains unclear. The weapon still lives on in the original Half-Life, impressing viewers of speedruns and frustrating deathmatch players to this very day. As this is the first episode in our new video series, some things may be experimental or rough around the edges. If you'd like to see more from us, consider supporting us on Patreon or Ko-fi with the links on screen. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you like this video. I've been your host, Kimona Lewin. Thanks for watching.